Until recently, I had a pretty settled opinion about the so-called dating crisis. Basically, my opinion was this. Men haven't caught up with the new reality of emancipated women. And if dating feels broken, that's mostly on them. Then a social media post caught my attention, and I threw myself into a rabbit hole of commenting and rebutting replies. That's usually, admittedly, a waste of time, but this time it wasn't. The podcaster Chris Williamson had posted one of those dating graphics. A matchmaking service had found women were far more likely than men to reject a partner who earns less or is less educated. I didn't doubt this, but the statistic felt one sided and misleading. So I left a comment. I said, ask the reverse question. Ask men if they'd be happy to marry up a woman who's richer, smarter, more educated, and watch how many men would back off. So it's not like women are more difficult than men. I got a lot of likes, but I also got a lot of hate. And as you'd expect, only for men. Are you stupid? Your IQ must be single digits, and so on. But that's not the part that stuck. The part that stuck was the frustration underneath it. And not from the worst commenters, but from the ones actually trying to explain. Men saying, it's not that I'm threatened by a successful woman. It's that I come home to a competitor instead of a partner. Men saying they feel valued for what they provide and not much else. One of them put it as the difference between, hey, can you help me with this? And what, you can't do it? Fine, I'll pay someone. It's not like I wasn't aware of male frustration before. But to be honest, I mostly dismissed it as difficulty adjusting to modern women, which they would eventually overcome or have to overcome. But these weren't just grumpy men unwilling to modernize. I could see a deep frustration that had turned into hate. And some of the reasons given for that frustration were understandable and went beyond just traditionalist views of the gender deal. So it made me want to look harder at the half I'd usually skipped over, the female half. And once I started doing that, the actual pattern showed up on both the male and the female side. Both sides agree that the old deal is dead, but neither wants to take responsibility for the required changes. Instead, both still hold on to the parts of the old deal that suit them and decide it's the other side that needs to adjust. That's the comfortable lie this episode is about. We say we're playing by the new rules, but mostly we're still playing by the old ones, just the half that pays off for us, me included. But before I go further, let me check something, because not everyone is convinced there even is a dating crisis. So just quickly, is there? Looking at the statistics, I think yes. In Europe, the long-term pattern is clear. The EU marriage rate has roughly halved since the 1960s, from about 8 marriages per 1,000 people to around 4. More young adults are living alone, and loneliness is climbing at the same time. A 2024 study found that 57% of Europeans aged 18 to 35 felt moderately or severely lonely. The US shows a similar pattern from a different angle. A 2022 survey found that 63% of men under 30 were single, compared with 34% of women, which, as a side note, makes me wonder if men and women actually have the same definition of being single, but let's leave that aside. While the exact numbers vary by country and survey, the broader Western pattern is hard to miss. Fewer people are entering stable relationships early, more people are spending longer outside them, and many experience dating as more confusing and more transactional. The one thing not clearly rising is divorce, but that doesn't necessarily mean that relationships are healthier. It also reflects the fact that fewer people marry in the first place, and those who do tend to marry later and more cautiously. So the overall picture is fewer couples, lonelier singles, and a broad sense that the whole thing has become harder to navigate. Something has changed. The rest of this episode is about what. So let's look at the deal everyone agrees is dead. It was simple. A man provides, protects, leads, makes the first move. A woman cares, supports, keeps the house, raises the children. Status and protection on one side and care and submission on the other. That was the deal. I think it's important calling it that because the notion that this arrangement was the result of biological reality is mostly wrong. Men aren't born wired to pay every bill. Women aren't born wired to adore and wait on a man. Who leads, who earns, who does the dishes, none of that comes from nature. It came from the deal. Of course, it often wasn't fair in the sense that it made everyone happy. For a lot of women, it meant your whole worth ran through your usefulness, your service, your fertility, how small you were willing to make yourself. Plenty of women were trapped in it, with no money and no way out. Women had the worst end of it, clearly, but I wouldn't call the deal fair towards men either. The same deal put the entire weight of providing on him. He was expected to earn, to pay, to carry the household on his back, and be fine about it. If he couldn't provide, he wasn't really much of a man. Still, the old deal had one real benefit. Everybody knew the job. It was clear. We all know the reason this fell apart. Women won their independence, went on the pill, made money. They became the majority of university graduates across the developed world. In the OECD today, women are 58% of new graduates. Among people in their late 20s and early 30s, 52% of women have a degree, against only 39% of men. So many women just don't need a providing man anymore. As a consequence, men have become optional, and female expectations have risen. The majority of men now have to be actively wanted, and being wanted is a much higher bar than being needed. I think that's a big part of what gets called the masculinity crisis that you may have heard about. The loneliness, men dropping out of dating, the retreat into porn. Much of that, I think, happens because men run into a standard they don't know how to meet. That's probably not the only reason, but I think it's a big one. So, what to do about this? I've already hinted at how I used to see this. Men just need to step up, find a way to manage strong women and become a better man, basically, instead of fleeing into resentment and checking out. And that part of my old view still holds. The New Deal does require men to change, and many seem to be reluctant. Let me give you some examples. Let's look at intelligence. In one study, men were more attracted to women smarter than them when asked in theory. But when a woman actually outperformed them in person, they literally pulled away, rated her as less desirable, and reported feeling less masculine. Let's look at money and power. Another study followed married couples where the woman out-earned the man, and found that the more she out-earned him, the less admiration he felt from her, and the worse he rated the relationship. Another study found something just as telling about hierarchy itself. Men rated the exact same woman as more attractive as a long-term partner when she was described as their assistant at work, and less attractive when she was their boss. Same woman, same CV, the only thing that changed was who outranked whom. And this is not just showing up in dating experiments. A recent global survey found that 31% of Gen Z men agree that a wife should always obey her husband, while 33% say the husband should have the final word on important decisions. That's not a majority, but it's not marginal either. And it's especially striking because these are young men, not some old-fashioned grandfather generation. So clearly, men do not like women who are smarter, richer, or more powerful than them, across generations. The reason for this is what psychologists call precarious masculinity. Manhood isn't something you earn once and keep. It's something you have to keep proving. A partner who outranks you quietly undercuts that proof every single day, just by existing in that position. And the effort it takes to protect their identity is something most men try to avoid by choosing a woman that does not compete with them, whether or not she's actually doing anything actively to threaten him. So, what do men value in a woman? A large-scale survey of around 10,000 people across 37 cultures showed that men, like women, rank kindness, intelligence, and dependability at the top of their priorities. That part isn't where the sexes differ, though we've seen before that men probably rather mean not much more stupid than me when they say intelligent. The difference shows up further down. Men place more weight on youth and physical attractiveness than women do, across almost all cultures studied. Online dating data shows the same pattern in actual behavior, not just stated preference. So in reality, we see that despite widespread public advocacy for equal relationships, many men still seem drawn to the female role of the old deal: beauty, admiration, and a relationship structure where they're not outranked. But women are not simply innocent victims of this arrangement, and this is where I need to correct my old, rather one-sided perspective. The same large cross-cultural study I mentioned before, which found that men value looks more than women, also found that women place more importance than men on partners' financial prospects, ambition, and status-related traits, basically confirming that Instagram post that I found. In other words, men were still drawn to the traditional feminine package, but women were also still drawn to the traditional masculine package. And this pattern can actually be found in actual dating preferences too. One major study found that women's choices depended strongly on men's income and education. Another large dating site analysis found that women tended to prefer men who were taller, older, better educated, and higher earning than themselves. Classic gentleman behavior, such as opening doors, paying the bill, the old school gestures, is also rated as attractive by modern women, even while admitting that men who do this can come across as patronizing. And lastly, a staggering 18% of Gen Z women agree that a woman should always obey her husband. This is lower than the 31% agreement among men we saw before, but still a surprisingly high number, I think. Based on research, the reason behind these preferences is that money, education, and age signal the ability to protect a family, and chivalrous behavior signals the man's willingness to invest into a woman. The behavior reads as proof he'll protect and commit. So, the uncomfortable conclusion is this. Modern women may want equality in principle, but many still prefer men who satisfy the old provider deal. And modern men may praise strong women in principle, but many still prefer women who do not threaten their status. Publicly, everyone says they want equality. Privately, the dating market often still runs on hierarchy. At the same time, most people don't want the old deal back in full either. In a recent survey, 74% of women and 62% of men said gender equality was personally important to them. A majority of women now say they'd rather work than stay home, if given the choice. And when people are asked about marriage itself, only 30% prefer the old breadwinner husband, homemaker wife model. 62% say marriages are better when both spouses have jobs and share the household responsibilities. When it comes to raising kids, 73% of men and 80% of women say children are better off when both parents focus equally on career and home, not one of each. So most women aren't looking to trade away their independence. And most men aren't quietly hoping for the old arrangement either. The problem is not that people still have traditional role expectations. People are free to want whatever they want. The problem is the inconsistency. We can't selectively cancel the parts of the old deal that are inconvenient and keep only the parts that we like and put all responsibility for fixing the problem on the other. But both men and women do it. Both sides call their own version standards and the other person's version entitlement. What makes this issue difficult to resolve is that people are not honest, neither about their needs nor about their own role in it. That's how you get a woman who'll tell you she wants to be fully equal and still expects him to pick up the restaurant bill every single time. That's how you get a man who swears he's thrilled his partner's career is bigger than his and somehow still expects her to be the soft, easy, adoring one the minute they're through the door. And here's what makes this conflict even worse. Because even if modern men and women made peace and agreed to go back to the old deal, this would be no longer feasible. Because women have caught up. Remember the more degrees and increased earning power? There just aren't enough men a step above in the market. The math's run out. We've become too equal to supply the inequality both sides are quietly looking for. The bottom line is, the old deal is gone and nothing has replaced it because both sides are stuck with inconsistent role expectations, which they expect the other side to miraculously fix. So why not redesign it freely? Let every couple build their own, depending on their own individual characters and needs. Same-sex couples more or less do it, and they manage. And that's mostly right. The old rules were mostly a social arrangement, not nature. Mostly, but not entirely. Because a few biological facts do push back. The hard one is reproduction. Pregnancy, birth, and breastfeeding all happen in one body. That can't be split evenly. So having children forces some specialization, whether you like it or not. Then there are biological limits that lie on the spectrum. Men have on average a higher sex drive and more appetite for casual sex, a real and recurring source of friction in relationships. Women on average lean a little bit more towards caring, people-centered work, which nudges who drifts into the nurturing role even when no one's assigning it. And of course, men are on average stronger and taller, which makes them a more natural fit for heavy physical work and protection when it's needed. Those are the facts that evolution won't change anytime soon, so it's probably a good idea to take them seriously. But most items in a relationship still remain flexible. Who earns, who leads, who pays, who soothes, none of it was ever linked to biology. It's ours to rewrite, and mostly we still haven't. So, what's the new deal? I don't know, and I won't pretend otherwise. But here's the one thing I'm sure of: the dishonesty is the problem before the inconsistent expectations. We've each kept the half of the old deal that flatters us and call the other person's half entitlement. And you can't build anything new from there. So, if there is one takeaway, it isn't be nicer or lower your standards, but to be honest about one's beliefs and start with yourself. Before you add up what the other person owes you, get honest about what you're bringing and about which of your own expectations you've never actually questioned since the old deal died. That's where a new deal starts. I'm a long term single, so believe me, I'm asking myself the same thing. Tell me what you come up with.